Have you ever been in a situation or situations where no matter how hard you tried, everything seemed to go wrong? Well, if you've been in that space, you're going to love this conversation. And my friend Deborah Razo brings it. She's got massive life experience as a single mom, as a real estate investor, just clawing to make ends meet. Then massive car accident, battling cancer, you name it. She has experienced it and has come out with a massive intentional faith that is not only endearing, but inspiring. Can't wait for you to listen in. I'm Dr. Nate Salah. This is A Call to Leadership. Deborah, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Oh my goodness, yes, we've been anticipating this day. You've come all the way from California.
I know.
To be with me, and it's such a treat to share your story with our listener. You have had a, dare I say, exciting life so far, year to date, right? You, lots of challenges, lots of dips and turns, and they've continued to prepare you for the work ahead. And I just want to start with a little introduction on your journey. We'll get into some trials, we'll get into some triumphs, but getting into life, tell me about when you decided, I'm going to be an entrepreneur. What was that like?
It was during a very tumultuous time in my life. I was actually getting a divorce. And I was faced with the challenge. I had a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old at the time. They're actually grown adults now. This was over 30 years ago, although I haven't aged a bit. And I had to make a decision. The decision was, do I put the kids in childcare or do I become an entrepreneur? And I had a side gig at the time and make the side gig the full gig so that I could be around my kids, right? And it was a no-brainer question. And I think that, a lot of entrepreneurs are built that way. Like when they say, well, this is not an option for me. And it wasn't an option for me to hand the kids over to be raised by somebody else while I'm grinding it, right? So I was like, well, I'm going to grind it and raise them with, and I'm going to have to start a business to do that. Mm-hmm. And so I just did. Like, there was no turning back for me. That wasn't an option. And, I think people nowadays have said, burn the boats. You hear that phrase, burn the boats. But the fact of the matter is you kind of have to sometimes. That's the commitment that it takes, to have a business, not a hobby.
Yeah. What boats did you have to burn?
I had to burn the boat of thinking that I was going to go back into an office and leave my kids during the day. Yeah. And so I had to go, nope, that's not an option. You're going to need to figure out how to run a business, right? That's it. That's where you're going. And you need to figure out how to generate income for that business. So, I was a young single mother and it was like, yeah, this is what you got to do.
Do you remember how you felt during that period of transition?
Totally scared. Up in the middle of the night, kind of scared. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Not knowing how I'm going to make it. Yeah. Right. But, and through that time, there was a lot of realizations that popped. I remember being about a year into it and I was having problems being paid by some of my clients. And it was nearing Christmas, and I was like, how am I going to put presents under the tree? Very much worried about that. And I had a friend who had just got laid off. And we were like misery loves company. We were on the phone talking about it all. And he was like, the thing that really freaked me out is that I didn't see it coming in this corporate, world. He just one Friday got laid off, right? And I was thinking, wow, he's trading working in a corporate world for a false sense of security. And I'm trading entrepreneurship for a false sense of, freedom, right? Because you think that when you're an entrepreneur, you have all this freedom, right?
Yeah.
Do you really? We could have a discussion about that.
No, that's it. That's it. I love how you phrased all that, because it just reminds me of the choices we make, right? We make so many choices in life, and those choices lead us a certain direction. That direction leads us to a certain destination. And like, this is the whole idea around vision. We talk so much about vision, especially in our community, in our group, and our planning. And you think about your decisions then. I mean, how many years ago was this?
30
years ago.
Just
wow.
over 30.
Yeah, same. I 30 years ago, I just celebrated 30 years, as you know, in business. And it's scary. Oh my goodness, it's so scary. The unknown, and like you talk about security. And it's like, okay, well, what's my sense of security? And don't get me wrong, I applaud people who stay in the workforce from an employee perspective. I don't believe in the cockamamie of like, everyone needs to be an entrepreneur. If you're not an entrepreneur, then you're missing out. Like, yeah, who's gonna pick up your trash? The folks who are saying that. Who's gonna do, your get your groceries to the grocery, all this stuff, right? We need a wide range of people who have different desires and intentions and levels of security in different areas, right? But for someone who's taking that entrepreneurial leap, it's literally one of the scariest things you're going to do in your life. Now, granted, you can make the argument that, well, going to work for someone is scary too, and that can be as well. It's just a different kind of experience altogether.
Yeah.
It's difficult to describe.
Yeah, I think it is. And I agree with you. We need a diverse workforce. And I think there are those that have a fire in their belly and, want to make something work for themselves, and, I coach a lot of women entrepreneurs, and in that, in that arena, there are a lot of entrepreneurs that are starting out that are really hobbyists. They're not creating the income that they need to make a business survive. And it's really a mindset shift to, step your business out of being a hobby and into being a real business, something that you can rely on, right? And create your own sense of security with, right? I mean, I remember at the beginning of my business, I was white knuckling it every month thinking, how am I going to make rent for the next month, right? And then it got easier, and then it got easier, and then it got easier, until 5 years in, 6 years in, I didn't think about that anymore. I was thinking about, how do I grow this, right? Your strategies change.
Different seasons, right? Yeah. So the first season is really just planting the seed and protecting it, because it's so fragile early on, like any planting. So you have all these elements that can destroy it. Well, if it's destroyed, it won't bear any fruit. And that fruit literally is feeding you, feeding your family, paying your bills. I remember so many days, ramen noodles. I know it's a cliche, but they were cheap back in the day. Aldi, bread was $0.25, and I get, just bologna. And it's like, okay, I'm good. I'm good for at least a few days. You remember those days. Oh,
I remember those days, and my kids remember those days. I mean, you've met both my children now, and they knew, right? Like when mom was serving spaghetti and potatoes, or when she was taking them out for steak dinners, right? Like depending on how mom's business was going.
How much fruit was bearing, yeah.
It's definitely that, and there is some variance in your income, right? And how do you deal with that uncertainty?
Yeah.
My brother, who went into the Air Force, we've had long discussions about this. He's very, there's certain paths to take. Like you always know the path, you always know what you're getting paid, when you're getting paid, how it's all going to work, right? And there's a certainty about that he really loved, and he's like, I don't know how you do it, and I'm like, well, I'm used to this now, so this is not as something I have to overcome anymore, right? Like, it's like, oh, I know I'm being taken care of. I'm okay.
Yeah. You mentioned your kids, and I have met your kids. Kids are amazing, and they're in leadership, in business. It's been called the holy grail of motivation leadership, is understanding really what moves people. How did the kids tie into your motivation early on?
Well, they were all the motivation at the beginning, because I made the choice to start my first business because I didn't want to leave them, so, and they didn't know that. They were 1 and 3 at the time, but they were so young and at that, so impressionable. And, I wanted to be around and see all that and be available to that, even, if they're going to preschool or whatever. I wanted to be around afterwards. And so, you make sacrifices. I swung my schedule. A lot of times I was working after I put them to bed, but I was with them after they were off of school. You have to think outside of a traditional work box,
Yeah, I 100% agree. I suspect you remember those faces when you had a hard day. Looking at them.
Yeah. And, I had ways of letting off steam, I'll just say, that I actually didn't realize I was teaching them at the time. Like, sometimes when I had a hard day, there's tension, right? There's tension in me, and I didn't want that to be how the evening went with them. And so for me, music is a huge motivator, and I would blast like great hard rock music.
Come on.
And we would dance around the living room, right? All of us just dance and dance and dance and sing and dance. And we, until we were just kind of like exhausted, and it would just relieve the tension. And then it was like, okay, now mom's making dinner, all right, and so, yeah, you find ways of, dealing with things. So it's good.
Any favorite rock songs that you remember?
Well, I have to say that my kids and I are experts at Bohemian Rhapsody.
Come on.
Right? We know all the words. We all have our different parts to it. Yeah, we're pretty good at it.
Well, one of these days when we get them all together, maybe we can do an ensemble.
Yeah, you won't have any problem having us sing along.
All right, nice. That's touching, and it's so important to find that depth of motivation in your journey, right? And really sense of purpose. And that's a lot of what we do, right? We spend a lot of time talking about purpose, and especially when we're facing struggles, but not just in the struggles, of course, in the triumphs and in every season of life. Because you described, okay, we started in a season of really just planting, and we want to protect that. And then as we start getting a crop, well, then that crop starts to build and develop, and you're like, okay, this is good. Now I've got to do the next phase, and I've got to tend the crop, and I've got to nurture all of the aspects of everything coming in. And then sometimes maybe you get a little bit bigger crop than you thought you were going to get. Then you have to deal with that. Then you get more proficient at all of the ways that you run your business. Of course, you love spreadsheets like I love spreadsheets. You wouldn't tell by book by the cover, but you're a spreadsheet person, and that's important because you know your numbers.
Yeah.
You know the bottom line. Money is a necessary. It's not the root of all evil. People say, "Oh, money's the root of evil." No, it's not. It's the love of money. It's the root of all kinds of evil. It just means don't make it your idol.
Right.
Don't make chocolate your idol or blueberries or whatever it is. Right. Mm-hmm. Money is a blood flow. Mm-hmm. Through your business. You don't have any money, you're dead, right? Mm-hmm. When I used to teach business at one of the universities, I'd start a business course with 2 words, cash and flow. I'd say, these are your 2 most important words in all business.
Right.
If you don't have it, you don't have a business. Yeah. Talk a little bit about your tenacity with the financial piece.
Right. I'll say that, first of all, I just want to say that my background is, I'm a first generation American. Both of my parents were immigrants, and, very much taught, work hard, keep your head down. Don't dream big, like things like that. And the fact of the matter is that, I am kind of a dreamer, and I like to dream big. And I don't know that at the beginning of my businesses, I really understood what it took to do that. And the fact of the matter is, it took a lot of personal growth. And to even think that I could maintain my own businesses and I could up the level of my cash flow, and I had the ability to draw more in and get better at it. And it has taken and continues to take teams of people to help me with that, from, looking at the numbers in a different way to understanding the mindset of being able to expand more and, go into projects with more zeros, right? Because there's shifts that happen in your own personal mindset that allow you to grow that way and that don't allow you to grow that way.
Yes.
And so I had to start to become aware of them. I mean, like, I started out, you don't know what you don't know, right? I started out like that. And then as things progressed, I'm like, oh, I don't know anything about this. I better find out about that, and luckily I am a person who pursues new learning. I enjoy that. So it's come in handy when I've wanted to grow my business and grow myself. Because the person I am today, 30 years later, has a whole different tool chest than the person that I was when I started.
Yes. You've talked about this, and you've said it a few times during our short conversation so far, and I want to make sure this is picked up by our listener. You've talked about just the mindset piece, right? And the mindset, we can look at it different ways. Programming, habits, patterns, right? That's all in the same realm of mindset. I tend to like to look at it from the perspective of pathways. And so in your mind, we have neural pathways, and they are widened by activity in that realm. If you spend a lot of time learning certain math, your neural pathway expands, and imagine it like a pathway, a road, if you will. Well, nothing starts out as a road. Imagine you have a forest full of brush and all kinds of things, but you have a pathway that is completely paved. The problem is it doesn't take you to where you want to go. But yet we spend so much time in our lives going down those roads, those pathways, because they're already paved. And the problem is, but it's not taking you where you want to go. So the hard work is, you know what? I'm going to take the pathway that takes me where my vision is leading, even if it's full of thorns and thistles and rocky ground. But the more I walk it, the more attainable and easier it is to go down that pathway. And eventually it starts out as perhaps a forest, then it becomes a path, and then it becomes a little wider, a dirt road, and you put rock down, and eventually you pave it, you put concrete, and look at that. It's a beautiful superhighway. And so that's the heavy lifting you're talking about, is the mindset shift.
It is, and I have a few beliefs around this, and I'd love to share them with you. One is that I have a sign over my desk that says there are no mistakes, because I think that people get caught up in a head about the choices they make and thinking that they're going to make a mistake in whatever choice they have. And the fact of the matter is, going forward is not a mistake, whatever choice it is. Like, whatever you encounter, green or blue. I mean, it is literally that. As far as the pathways go, when I was a young entrepreneur, I've done a lot of coaching and things. It was brought to my attention that I was really looking for a lot more certainty than I thought I was. And I have a tendency at the beginning of the years to dedicate a quote to that year. And there was a quote that I had dedicated to the year, and it was a quote by Tony Robbins, and it was said, the amount of uncomfortable that you can that you have in your life is in direct relation to the success you'll encounter. Mm-hmm. And by success, he didn't mean monetary success. He meant success in love. Like, we have to be uncomfortable. We have to open our hearts, right? Mm-hmm. He meant success in all parts of your life. So I decided that was going to be my quote for the year, and that if I was faced with a decision that I needed to make, I was going to go with the one that I felt the most uncomfortable with. Mm-hmm. And man, the personal growth that happened to me that year, it was incredible. It was incredible. I went in directions and places I didn't know that that I could even go. And I built my confidence that way. And I liked it so much that I dedicated the next year to the same quote, and I believe there are paths, but I'm going to put it even in more simple terms. There's fear and there's faith. Mm-hmm. There's fear and there's faith. And our minds are these little reptile things that want to keep us safe. And they bring up every fear. Thank you. Thank you, mind. Thank you, little mind. I love that you bring things to my attention that I might not look at before, but I get to choose one or the other. I get to choose if that's truly something I should be scared about, or if that's just the little mind bringing something to my attention and that I decide, no, I have faith it's going to work out differently. So, and I think that those fears hide from us, ourselves. Like, we don't see that fear until it's really brought into our face, or that we're looking for it. Why am I stopping here? Why am I making this decision this way? Why am I going down that same path that's leading me to that same result that I don't want, right? Mm-hmm. Instead of taking a different road. What's happening inside of me that is not allowing me to expand or to change or to say, thank you, little mind. I don't have to believe everything you say.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's interesting. It brings to mind the 10th chapter of Matthew, and that's where Jesus is sending out the disciples 2 by 2. Very famous story. Mm-hmm. And in this story, he does something that's quite interesting. He tells them not to take extra stuff, right? Tells them not to over-prepare and get into, in some ways I would call it analysis paralysis, to walk in faith. Mm-hmm. And then he goes on to tell them all the things that could happen, right? They could get to a town and the town doesn't like them. They could get to a house and they get kicked out. They can be thrown in jail. They could even lose their lives. Mm-hmm. Then he says this, and he says it 3 times in this chapter. Why 3 times? It's so important. Do not be afraid. Well, because he knows at the very heart of our lack of faith is fear. Mm-hmm. And he wants to dispel that myth that the fear is a valid reason to not step forward in progress. Of course, another way to say what you had mentioned with Tony Robbins is comfort is the enemy of progress. Mm-hmm. And so we cannot hope to progress unless there's some level of discomfort. And sometimes discomfort is just taking one step.
Yeah, absolutely.
One step.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that I think that's a super practical application, biblical practical application to how we live our lives and how we choose to express our faith in what God has planned for us, even through the hard times. And, for me, I'm a true disciple, right? Like, I'll watch Jesus feed thousands with 3 fish. And then the next day I'm like, where are you taking us? What are we going to eat? Right? Like, I don't know. We're imperfectly perfect humans.
And then we face trials.
Yeah.
And you face some trials.
Oh, yeah.
Would you like to talk about some of those trials?
Sure. I guess, I'll talk about a couple of the big milestones. 15 years ago, I was in a really bad car accident. And I kind of jokingly say that, I had an opportunity to start over. I think that a lot of people have those types of opportunities. Like, sometimes it's the death of a loved one. Sometimes it's divorce, loss, sorrow. For me, it was a car accident, and the driver of the SUV, we got a flat and the car flipped. It was just so by chance, and it flipped driver's side first, so I got the brunt of the accident, and I was air vac to a hospital, and they had to stitch together my head wound and told me I had a broken neck. And I spent the next year healing. It took a long time. We had to wait for the swelling to go down before I could even get my titanium brace. And then I was 9 months in a neck brace, and I had to have people take care of me. And my 2 kids were now in high school at that point. And I had a lot of time to think. And I had, I've been an entrepreneur for 30 years, and I had a business, but I guess I had the opportunity to ask myself the hard questions that I think sometimes we avoid, which is, do you like the life you're leading? Is this how you want to lead your life? And I had a business that was great. Don't get me wrong, I didn't have a bad life, but it wasn't the life I wanted. I had a business that was running me, that I wasn't running. Like, I was an employee of the business, and I'm like, this isn't what I signed up for, right? I wanted, and I think I did what any, typical A-type woman would do, is I started Googling passive income, and because I wanted to live differently. And my brother was around me and taking care of me a lot, and he knew I wanted to make those changes in my life. And he was the one that was like, if you want to make those changes, you're going to have to change your mindset. And that's when I actually started going to Robin's events. He had just been to one, and he said, maybe when you're better, you should go. And I did. And the fact of the matter is that, I didn't just need strategies. I needed a new story. And I needed to believe that what I dreamt could be my life, that could really make it happen. And that's all about the story that you tell yourself, right? And so I needed to change that. And that's not as easy as changing something mechanical. So that needed some time to set in. But that's when I started becoming a real estate investor, wanting the passive income that it had to provide. And I think when I truly connected with my story and my vehicle, that's when I truly found my tribe. And that's when I founded the Women's Real Estate Network, and to help women both grow financially and, I say self-worth and net worth.
Love it.
So it was, the outcome was amazing. The process was hard. Yeah.
Where was your faith in this journey, this part of the story?
God, I went through, what are those 5 stages of grief, right? Like my life had changed, and I remember being, and I was a person of faith before the accident. So there was a part of me that was like, why did you let this happen to me? God, like really questioning that. And I remember somebody who was praying over me was like, read Job. And I was like, Job was an idiot. I was mad. And the fact of the matter is, I would wake up with anxiety in the middle of the night, 2 or 3 o'clock, with just feeling like an elephant was on my chest, wondering how I was going to pay for things. Like, if I'm not working, I'm not making any money, and how is this all going to work out? And it was during that time that, instead of trying to calm myself in anxiety, that I started opening up the Bible and reading. And I still think back to some of those days as being some of the most precious times with God. My communion with God really started to change, and therefore did my faith. And even now, when I'm worried about something in the middle of the night, I reach for the Bible, because I just feel like, oh, God, you're waking up in the middle of the night because, oh yeah, I didn't give you time today. And you just want my attention, and I want to be open to that. So I think that's when, I really started taking that into my heart and realizing, that my faith would pull me through. And that God had something different for me. God had something different planned for me. And, I, Nate, this past year has been really hard for me. And, I feel like sometimes I just had rewritten my story from the accident, and another chapter begins, and that is that I was diagnosed with aggressive cervical cancer last year, And, it was a really hard time because I had to do chemo and radiation simultaneously. And my husband got into a car accident that put him in the hospital and ICU for 5 days. And I had some business assets that I was losing. And the truth is, right now, I'm not sure what path. You talked about a path. I'm not sure what path is going to be in rebuilding from this past year. I just know that I'm not going to give fear the lead. I'm going to give faith the lead.
Yes.
Fear is a little tricky little thing. And I heard a comedian, if you don't mind me saying, talk about fear. And he said, fear is a jerk. Your brain can be a jerk. That's what he said. Your brain can be a jerk. He's like, it's got all the goods to make you feel great. Dopamine, endorphins. It can make you feel amazing, right? But it's like a withholding little troll, and it sits by and it's like, do you want to feel really good? And you're like, yeah, I want to feel good, and your brain's like, you want to feel really nice? And you're like, yeah, I want to feel really nice. And then it's like, go for a jog. And you're like, wait, I'm the commander in chief. I want you to release all this now. And, the fact of the matter is that's how we are, right? But, I know that even though I have all those debates going on in my little, reptile brain, that, I'm going to walk in faith. And even though I don't know where that walk is leading right now.
Wow.
That was a long answer.
I love it. It's not only touching, but it hits home, because you're not going to meet a person who hasn't experienced some kind of trial. And you sharing your trials is not only vulnerable, but it reminds us that we're all in a shared experience of life.
Yeah.
And I think about trials, and I think the whole, why God, right? I've experienced some trials, my wife much, much more than me. And I was so many years like, why God? And I turned to the scripture, and that's the right thing to do. It's been said God's will is in God's word. And the stories to me are the most encouragement pieces, because I think about like somebody like Paul, and he experienced tremendous trials. And you'd think, okay, he was given this amazing mission to share the good news with the Gentiles, right? It's a big job. So you think God's going to make his pathway straight, easy, paved road, right? All kinds of refreshments along the sides, no problems at all. And it's the opposite. What happens to Paul? He's imprisoned, he's beaten, he's stoned, he's shipwrecked, he's left for dead. I mean, you count just those 5 things. Most people in life will never experience any one of those. He experienced all 5. And I think, God, why? And here's how I understand this. God is intimately acquainted with our circumstances. He cares deeply about our circumstances. However, God is in the character building business, and he's going to take us through our circumstances to build us into the character of Christ. And I think that's why James opens his book with, consider it pure joy. Who says this? When you face all kinds of trials. Who puts the words pure joy and all kinds of trials in the same sentence? Nobody does. But why does James do it? Because he says this, because your trials will, as you move through them, will build your perseverance, and then character and hope. And what does he say? Hope does not disappoint.
Yeah, it's true. And I think it's really hard when you're going through it. Because you do cry out, like, why, I'm a follower. Why this, really, my character needs to be this strong.
Really? I was good with the character before the trial.
I was, but yeah, but then I look back, and I mean, the car accident was 15 years ago, and it changed my life into a deeper story of faith. And through that faith, I was able to reach others, and I was able to create something I never thought I'd be able to do, and that's all credit to God, right? Like that's where that goes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm thrilled that we're along this journey together. I'm thrilled for the time we've had over the years, and especially in this next chapter of the story as we continue to grow together and share with our new mission, if you will, with our G3, our Grow, Give, Go, and listeners have been hearing more and more about that.
Yeah.
And your involvement has been essential to the community and to sharing the message. And as we move forward, I'd like to close with a question. Eventually, you will be on this side of the end of this side of the journey, and you'll be looking at all the wonderful people you were able to impact and the lives you touched. What's one thing that you will have been blessed to have others have said about you?
Wow. Okay. I hope they say I was kind. Like I think about, the end in mind. And of course, I don't know, as a Christian, you want the, well done, good and faithful servant, right? And in my interpretation of that means, did you touch people along the way? Did you let them know where your source of faith came from? Did you have integrity in your dealings, both business and personal? Like, were you accountable, right? And even though I stand to be corrected daily by the Lord, those are the things I shoot for. So I hope that they're said, and I hope, they said she lived. She lived life. She believed in that, and that took her in a different direction, and it took all of us with her, right? Because I think that's how you pave the way for others. You stand in front of them and go, why don't you do that? Why don't you believe you can? Right? Like, and start, speaking blessings over them to do it. So I hope so.
Well, you are on your way.
Yay.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. This was fun.